everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm continuing my look at some recent Marvel Legends figures as I slowly catch up with my reviews, and we've had a really interesting wave recently, and it's a little bit different from usual because it's a bit more experimental. In fact, I'm not really sure what to call this series other than its comic themes, although we've had comic themed waves in the past, except this time you can see obviously the layout is very different. It comes with this comic book accessory, which we'll take a little look at later on, and the characters seem to be incredibly disparate and eclectic. There's not a real through line connecting them all. And perhaps that's why there's no Build-A-Figure this time around, meaning you can pick and choose which ones you want. As it happens, I wanted the vast majority of these. I picked up 4 out of the 6. And today I'm going to start off by taking a look at the Ultimate Iron Man. So let's dive straight into it and look at this brand new packaging. Clearly, they've opted for that flat card approach. For me personally, I really like this approach. I like to hang some of my figures on the wall, so having them nice and flush, hanging flat against the wall there works really, really well for me. And this is really nice and colourful. Obviously, we're seeing a brand new layout and design here with specific comic book logos to this character. I also appreciate that splash of colour that we see in the sort of blue collage in the background, again specific to the character, taken from the source material, the comic books. Looks great to me. I really like how they've tried to create that comic book cover sort of effect by having that sort of ribbon at the top there with a number 1. That's really cool. I think that's a really nice little touch there. And then of course we can see the figure himself through that window display and the plastic packaging, his various accessories, and we even have highlighted this fact that it comes with a comic book accessory. And I guess that's what we might theme or call this wave, the comic accessory wave, maybe. And then if we flip it and look at the reverse, again, very, very colourful display. We see a slightly enlarged image of the comic book that this figure is inspired by, and then we have a little bit of bio about the character, and a handy reminder of the other figures in this wave. So nothing earth-shattering here, but what I do like is the splash of colour that we're seeing, and also the emphasis on the comic books. I think that's a real nice touch. It's a bit of a head-scratcher for me as to why they've chosen to release this version of Iron Man now years and years and years after the fact, but hey, I'm really pleased to have them because I quite like that this is a very distinctive, very different kind of look for the character, a different suit of armor entirely. And I actually quite like collecting these various different suits of Iron Man with the ultimate aim of one day creating a hall of armor or an armory for Iron Man would be really cool. But I digress. Let's take a look at the sculpting on this figure. And there's a lot to love here because there's an awful lot that's brand new and original, which is really, really pleasing. So a lot of tooling has gone into this. Straight off the bat, the head sculpt, of course, is brand new. We've never had this before, this shaped helmet, so this is absolutely new. In terms of paint apps, it's actually fairly minimal, but we do have some gold on the faceplate there and the blue, and some highlighting around the edges, so that a little bit of black going around there to really draw that distinction. That looks really cool, but all in all, I think this works very, very nicely. Now, I did want to point out that this is not the first Ultimate Iron Man we've had from Marvel Legends. There was one other many, many, many years ago, and we can see a sharp contrast here. And throughout the video, I will pepper in these comparisons so you can see the difference. And clearly the inspiration for the first release was a slightly later version or interpretation of the armor, so it has a smoother, rounder helmet to begin with. It also has chrome paint. Now, I happen to absolutely love this, and it's one of the reasons I've kept this figure because I still like it all these years later, despite some very obvious flaws and drawbacks, which we'll see a little bit later when we compare the two side by side. But the other thing that original had that this one doesn't is the ability to remove the helmet and have a Tony Stark head underneath. Now, obviously, swapping out the heads would be better in terms of the proportions. You will see that Tony Stark head looks a little bit too small on his body, but if they had a swappable head, that would have been cool, and it's a shame they didn't include that this time around. Now, virtually element of this new figure is entirely new tooling, new sculpting, and that's really, really impressive because it's very rare that we get that in a Marvel Legends figure these days. So it's great to see something completely new top to bottom because this is so distinctive and so different to any other version of the character we've seen thus far. So, yeah, what's not to love about this? I think this is very, very nicely sculpted. It seems to be pretty comic book accurate, which is lovely in terms of the proportions, dimensions, the angles, the way it's been pulled together. I think looks fantastic. There's some use of paint here, or certainly a lot of different plastics being used to create different tones between armor plates and things like that. There's obviously different darker plastic, some black plastic used in here against the sort of silver grey plastic. Then there's some red paint and blue paint here and there, just to draw that distinction. There's even hints of yellow on the legs, for example, and on the shoulder blades, and even on the gauntlets. So there's an awful lot going on here. There's some really nice detailing as well. Lots of grooves and rivets and things like that, and there's particularly some nice detailing actually in between the joints, so we can see that sort of ribbing, which is really quite nicely done. I also really like the gauntlets and the sort of the blaster that he has on his wrist there. Very nicely done. And then the boots themselves are very cool as well. Again, very, very different to anything else we've ever seen. Really nicely shaped, very distinctive. And he has a really nice solid footing as well. Again, completely different feet to anything else we have in the series. Just a lot of detail in here. Could it have all been enhanced with a nice wash here and there? Absolutely. But as it is, it still looks quite colourful, very faithful to what we see in the comic books, and actually quite striking. So I'm actually really impressed with how this figure looks all in all. So let's look at the articulation. He has a ball joint at the top of the neck, and he can rotate his head all the way around, which is pretty impressive. He can wobble it left and right a little bit, not much, and he even has capacity to nod his head forwards a little bit and backwards. There's not a huge range of motion, but there's more than I thought there would be, actually. Now, the shoulder pads will lift up, which is great, meaning that those ball joints in the shoulders can lift all the way up and out there. There's a complementary bicep swivel. There's a double pin at the elbow, meaning his arms can get just probably about 45 degrees, and then there's a standard pin swivel at the wrist. Now, the gauntlets are going to hinder what you can do with this to some extent, so just be aware of that. He does have a ball joint in the top of the torso, which means he can rotate all the way around and sort of lean left and right a little bit. And then he has another ball joint at the waist, which is kind of redundant and a bit weird because it doesn't seem to want to actually move, which is not great. And it also means he can't really bend forwards backwards despite having two very viable joints here, which is like, what the hell? Now, he does have ball joints in his hips. The legs will kick out to the side. The thigh swivel as well. The legs will kick forwards a really good distance, and they'll even go back, which is really nice. Another double pin, this time at the knee, so that lower leg can kick all the way back there, which is lovely. And then he has a ball joint in the ankle there as well, allowing that foot to hinge forwards and backwards, and, it's kind of move from side to side, rock a little bit maybe. And then for accessories, he comes with an additional 2 pairs of hands, 2 open palm hands and 2 gripping hands, and his comic book accessory. Now, the comic book accessory is quite interesting. This is a hard plastic piece. It's just made to look like a comic book. It is reprinting Ultimate Iron Man #1, which is very cool. And that's it, really. The open palm hands are really cool. They're a brand new sculpt. We've not seen these before, but it's a shame because he does have holes there, like sort of peg holes, and you think they could have given maybe some blast effects. That would have been quite nice. Pretty standard with Iron Man figures these days. Sadly, we're not getting anything extra. And of course, he can't hold that comic book, which is quite a nice touch. It's quite unusual, but it's quite, there's something quite pleasing about it nevertheless. Now, before I wrap up for today, I did want to just showcase him standing side by side with that previous Ultimate Iron Man. As I said, it's a slightly different take on the armor, but nevertheless, it's the same universe, I suppose. They're not too disparate, and I thought it'd be good just to put them side by side so you can see the obvious contrast between these two. Now, one of the things as I mentioned at the top of the video, that I really love about this first release is the use of gold chrome. I think that's absolutely stunning, right? I think it looks good after all these years, and it's the reason I still own it, because the figure itself isn't great otherwise, but I love these chrome pieces. Otherwise, the actual dimensions, proportions, the articulation, all of that is far, far, far inferior to this latest release, which just outdoes it virtually on every capacity. I love how accurate this new version is in terms of its design, it being faithful to the comic books, which is really, really good. And yeah, the articulation is better. That first release obviously had these bow legs, really, really unfortunate ball joints in the hips, which just look awful. I can't even get him to stand. That's how bad it is. But as I said, I do love that original chrome paint, and I wish they kind of did something like that these days. Sadly, that just seems to be a thing of the past. Okay, so final thoughts from me. I'm going to give this figure 4 stars, and this could have almost been a 5-star figure because there's so much effort gone into this. There's an awful lot of new things that's to be loved, so this brand new sculpt is fantastic. I think it's really, really good. I really like how faithful it is to the comic books. I think it's got a really nice articulation layout and design. It's not entirely effective, so that's again one reason why I have to remove a star there, because obviously not being able to bend forwards, that kind of useless bottom joint there in the waist is just a mystery. I don't know why that isn't working properly. That's so weird. So it loses a star for that. So close and yet so far. Um, I think, would I have preferred to have seen a bit of chrome paint? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to hold that against this figure because that is not standard these days. And I think, what we've got works perfectly well. I think another reason for removing a star there is just the lack of accessories, really. I think, an alternate Tony Stark head is a bit of a no-brainer. Likewise, some blast effects. Again, pretty much a no-brainer these days. Pretty standard stuff. A shame that we didn't get anything like that this time around. But having said all that, I really like this figure. I just love the way it looks. I love that it's so different to anything else, any other Iron Man that we have in our collection. I think it's really bright and colourful despite an overall darker design. And I just think it looks great. So it's a real quality figure. And I think if you like this version of the character, or you like collecting Iron Man armors, you're going to want to pick this guy up. It's just a shame they didn't go that extra mile to really push it over the edge. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.